Recording just because I've promised everyone who's registered that I will share the recording, so there best be one. This is often the thing that I remember midway through the introduction. So if you feel that you would rather not be on video, feel free to drop off. But otherwise, I would love to see your faces as we do the workshop, because it's always helpful for me to understand what people are up to, whether there's nodding and agreeing or whether there are sort of frowny faces as we go. So up to you, but really appreciate it if you can leave your videos on so I can see your beautiful faces. And while we're waiting to just another minute or so, I wanted to introduce my co-founder, Naveen Keswani. You can see him on the screen there. He's one of our participants, so waving now. Naveen's going to be helping out in the chat there and just helping me identify when perhaps I might have missed a question along the way. So feel free. I think there's not so many of us that we can't have a conversation along the way, but I will keep us moving, as I said, so we can finish at 9. But if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat, and we will either scoop it up at the time or we'll try and address it at the end. So we're just a minute past the hour. I think it's probably time to kick off, just to say thank you to all the people who were here early, and we'll roll other people in as they come in. So I wanted to start by acknowledging that I'm sitting here today on beautiful, somewhat grey and cool Gadigal country in the inner west of Sydney, in New South Wales, Australia. For those of you who are joining us from overseas, I know there are a few who have enrolled or registered from other parts of the world. And that time of the year, it's the 1st of October, it is a time when we're seeing a lot of bird life. There's a lot of squabbling over spaces in trees at the moment, which is kind of interesting to watch. And so that kind of connection to country, to connection to the place where you live, is something that Indigenous people all over the world, and particularly the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, have really modelled for us for tens of thousands of years. And we'll touch back on that theme in our workshop today. But before we get into that detail, that kind of very Western science detail, I just wanted to acknowledge that when we say evidence-based, my tradition, my training is in Western science. And when I say evidence-based, that's what I'm talking about. But I also want to acknowledge that elders from other traditions have looked after themselves, their community, their country for generations uncounted, and that's a different way of thinking about evidence. So with that as background, what are we going to do today? Well, firstly, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm sure many of you have got no idea who I am, and so I thank you for your courage and your openness in signing up to today. I finished my PhD in psychology about 25 years ago. I came from not a university going household, if you like, family. So I was the first in my family to go to uni, and certainly the first to get an advanced degree. And on my weekends and in my spare time, I really like to put myself out of my comfort zone so I could go and do scary, difficult things. And so I guess I thought of myself as being really quite well informed about stress and about what might contribute to burnout, and be pretty resilient. And yet in my first year in the workforce, I promptly burnt out, which is kind of embarrassing, right? That is an interesting first year experience to have in the workforce. And so I became really interested in where that came from, not just as a kind of list of tips and tricks that might work, that might possibly help, but in a kind of systemic way that would help me reliably not only avoid burnout for myself, but also to help my teams, right? The more senior I got in, and my work for 20 years was in consulting and in either internal or external, but I worked in big corporate environments with a lot of pressure, with client teams and internal teams who really needed to do a lot of really high quality work in very short periods of time. And so I felt like I needed to apply the kind of problem solving that comes from consulting to a really reliable way of helping people to do terrific work. So it's not about slacking off, but also to do that in a healthy and sustainable way. So I call it healthy high performance, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Not just about solving burnout, but to get to a place where you can be doing great work and really thriving on it. So that's me. What we're going to do today is define burnout, what it is and what it isn't. I'm going to trouble the official definition just a little bit. We're going to stretch it. I want you to understand where burnout comes from in a systemic way, as I said, not just the pat answer, oh, it's just stress. And to understand in a really concrete way your specific burnout system. And so most of you, I think almost all of you, will have received a confirmation email, my reminder email from yesterday afternoon that had the template in it. We're going to be working with a kind of, we call it the canvas or a template. If you don't have that, Naveen either already has or will post a link to that as a PDF file. So you can download that in the background while I just give you the intro. Or just feel free to take notes in your own way. You don't have to use that template. I just find it helpful to kind of categorize things a little bit. So we're going to take the theory into practice for you in your daily lives. And then we're going to learn how to flip that burnout system. Once we understand the pieces of the puzzle and how they work together, we're going to work out for you how to start turning that around. So instead of producing burnout, you've got something that looks much more like growth. So what actually is burnout? This is as close to an official definition as we are going to get. This is the World Health Organization's definition from about 2019. And they described it as a syndrome, which just means a cluster of symptoms. We don't have any other way of talking about it than just a blob of things that we observe together, which results from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And there are three categories of symptoms, that syndrome. Those symptoms are physical exhaustion, mental distance, so feeling a bit cynical, a little bit like, your care factor is a little lower for work that you used to really care about, and reduced efficacy, so you're just not feeling as good at your work anymore. And I've got two problems with that definition. And for context, this is the second definition that the WHO has published, so it's not like it's set in stone. I'm going to say it was 2014, the official definition at that time was a state of vital exhaustion, which is sort of poetic, if you like, not very specific. So it has moved in the past, and I'm hoping that over time we will help to move it again to reflect what's really going on here. So the two problems I have, the two ways I'd like to stretch this definition. First of all, stress is fundamentally physical. So we think about it as being this kind of cognitive thing where we're talking to ourselves, we're saying, oh, I'm really stressed, I'm really overwhelmed, there's a lot going on. But actually what's happening is that's your conscious brain's reaction to the physical experience of stress. So what's happening in that stress response, obviously, is your body's getting ready to fight or flee a threat. And that means you've got lots of extra blood glucose release so your muscles can work. You've got your immune system in action. You've got a bunch of stress hormones that are mediating all of that. So cortisol and all the other things that you hear about social media. So it's a very physical reaction. And that tells us that it can't just be workplace stress. It's got to be all the stress, because bodies don't differentiate, right? So paid work and unpaid work, everyone here, I notice almost always these sessions have more women than men in them. It's because we are more likely, not exclusively, but more likely to be doing unpaid work. And to pretend that unpaid work doesn't come with stress is to just ignore half of the stress issue in burnout. So that's my issue number one. Let's think about stress as a whole, not just workplace stress. Issue number two is when we talk about successfully managing stress, quite often what we're talking about is only the stress part of the picture. So if you think about your capacity to deal with challenges in the world, your sense of well-being in the world on this y-axis here, when there's a challenge, this kind of load period, we rise to that challenge. That's what all those resources kind of being released in your body are doing. We rise to meet that challenge. But if it goes on too long, we start to dip down below our starting point, right? And that is the dip that stress puts us into. And then what happens for all of us, even Elon Musk admits to sleeping a bit, there is a recovery period. Right. And if we only talk about the stress part of burnout, then we're forgetting that the recovery part is just as important, or even more important at the moment, I would argue. So the two problems I have with the official definition at the moment is we're restricting our view of stress to just one source of stress in the workplace. And we're restricting our view of the system to just stress, and we're ignoring recovery. And it's that imbalance. It's not stress on its own that causes burnout. It's the imbalance between the stress period and the recovery period that produces this downward slope, where eventually, we're feeling okay, we're feeling okay, we're feeling okay. And then we hit the bottom of our resources. So physiologically, what's happening here is we've got two branches of our autonomic nervous system. So central nervous system is what helps you move around, do things deliberately. Autonomic nervous system is the part that does everything else, basically keeps us alive, keeps our heart beating, lungs moving, all that good stuff. And it has two branches, and only one of them can be in charge at any given point in time. So one is the recovery system. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system, or you might have heard rest and digest, hence the hammock and the feast. And it's the one that lets your body top resources back up again. So it's doing a bunch of cleanup after a stress experience. It's replenishing resources in all of your tissues and systems in your body. The other one is the stress system. It's the one that drains resources. It's called the sympathetic nervous system. So again, you might have heard fight or flight. So the two branches of the system, only one can be in charge at any given point in time, and they're built to counterbalance one another. Stress is about draining resources to go do things that you need to do in the world. Recovery is about kind of retreating and building those systems back, or those resources back up again. And so that means it's actually really helpful to think about, rather than work-life balance, because work can have stress and recovery and life can have stress and recovery, it's really helpful to think about stress recovery balance. Partly because we know it's quite blended, like I've just been describing, but also because if you have sufficient resources, if your tank is relatively full, you can actually deal with a pretty extended period of stress. Right? It's not that I'm advocating for avoiding stress or, necessarily reducing stress as a whole. It's about making sure that you are topping up or kind of giving yourself adequate resources so that you can draw down when you need to. So I'm going to pause there. That's a lot of talking from me. Does that all make sense? Any questions there? Excellent. All right. I love it. We can come back to questions at the end, obviously, if I am a good user of time. Let's go. All right. So my definition, if I were queen of WHO, would be to delete that workplace. So burnout is a syndrome resulting from chronic stress, just chronic stress, that hasn't been balanced by effective recovery. And I would extend what we're actually observing, because exhaustion, mental distance, and reduced efficacy sounds a little bit anodyne, honestly. It sounds a little bit, well, whatever. Like, why is that important? Actually, if you go through physical exhaustion for too long, you end up with serious physical health impacts. So this is where we start to get autoimmune disorders, where we start to get cardiological issues. That physical exhaustion can really have chronic health impact over long periods of time. Mental distance can actually, again, if it goes on too long, lead to serious mental health impacts. So depression and anxiety, obviously, being good examples there. And reduced efficacy, so not being so good at my job for a day or two, a bad day, actually can have very serious relationship impacts, both at work and at home. So I would argue we actually need to broaden the definition of burnout itself, and also recognise that it's not just a matter of having a weekend off or having a week off. It can actually harm us in the long run, and it's well worth avoiding. So this is the canvas that we're going to be working with. As I said, this is not compulsory. Don't feel like you have to use this. I just find it helpful to kind of arrange the pieces of the puzzle in this way. So Naveen's dropped the link to the PDF. If you haven't got that, feel free to pull it down. Otherwise, just take notes in whatever way makes sense to you. If you've got a journal that you like to use, obviously, just take it piece by piece, and you can put the pieces together again through Post-it notes or whatever you like to do in your own time. And what we're going to do is work through the top two white boxes, the good stress, bad stress boxes. We're going to go through the bottom boxes, good recovery, bad recovery. We'll do the middle diamond, which is about how each of those feels. And then we're going to come to the end points, the two triangles on either side, which is the systems elements that I think are really important to get across. So, first things first, often when we talk about stress, we talk about it as a single thing. I need to reduce stress. I need to eliminate stress. Quite often, your doctor, if you're having a really hard time, will say you need a less stressful job. We'll see articles that are about getting to zero stress or eliminating stress. And that's not helpful because stress can actually be, in fact, often is exactly what we need for high performance. It's where we learn, it's where we get into flow, that glorious feeling where you just lose track of time and you're really loving your work. And it's where we're most creative as well. So anyone who's doing creative work will know that when they're really, singing effectively, when they're really going well in their work, it doesn't feel super calm. It feels buzzy and exciting, right? So I would argue it's helpful to talk about stress in kind of two buckets. Now, obviously, they're not carefully divided in the way that I've put on this slide. There's a bit of a spectrum. But there is a sweet spot for stress, which I would call challenged, adequately challenged, which, if you think about the y-axis here, is where you get what I would call peak performance. And I don't mean in an elite athlete sort of a way. I mean, this is where you're really doing your best work, which is quite different from that fight or flight state that you get into when you are much further over to the right here, in that sort of overwhelmed zone. So you can think about that challenge zone as being win-win. It's much lower impact on your body. It's not that it has no impact, but it is much, your body's moving much more or working much more efficiently in that state, and you're getting better work at the same time, much better outcomes, and you're probably experiencing it as being much more pleasant. Versus overwhelmed, which is kind of the lose-lose stress zone. Typically, you are putting a really high load on your body, lots of wear and tear on your body, and you're not really getting good performance out of it either because you're too freaked out. So this is the space where we go to really habitual behaviors. So you might have heard about neuroplasticity and how we can kind of lay down new paths and do things that are different from what we've done in the past. This is not the space for that. This is where we're really just going to habitual behaviors and going as hard as we can to avoid or to reduce the stress that we're under. So, two kinds of stress. Over to you. I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to think about, just try and keep it quite narrow. You can think about yesterday if that helps. You can think about the past or just this week if that helps. But think about things that you have done or experienced. So, activities that you've undertaken or challenges that you've accepted, which have been good stress. They've been the right intensity and duration. They probably matter to you enough to kind of get you into that stress state, versus bad stress, too intense, went on too long, or it was just one of those things where you felt like you were making more effort than it was really worth. So the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So 5 minutes there. And if you're feeling brave, obviously, drop into the chat anything that you're observing as you go. There we go. I'm talking on mute this time. I was just saying we're nearly at the end of the 5 minutes, and I see there's a couple of people who've already volunteered. So good stress, being in control of an act. Oh yeah, being in control comes up every time. Really good observation, Glenys. Thank you. Yeah. Bad stress. Others are involved. Timelines stretch beyond what's reasonable. Yeah. Awesome. Mariam, long hours, insufficient breaks. Social media. Yeah, we'll swing back around to that one. Finances. Yeah. Admin. Yeah. Attending classes. Yes. Learning, working on art. I love it. And facilitate. Yeah. Excellent. Cancer, unrealistic expectations. Yeah, mental health issues really, really tough. I hear you. I'll talk about unpaid work, networking. Yes, learning something new. Get you out. Yes, getting you out of your comfort zone or expanding your comfort zone. I love it. Yeah, good deadlines. Yeah, run on a Sunday with no time pressure. Thank you, Naveen. Super cool. All right. Some beautiful themes coming out of that. Absolutely, control is one of the critical ones. So when things are being done to you, it can be very difficult to get into that good stress zone. Also, that sense of just not having the time or resources to do what you're expected to do. So, your chances of success generally, if you're feeling like you're fairly sure that you're going to be successful, you're not 100% sure, that's generally a good stress kind of an experience. If it's one of those things where you're just thinking this is impossible, it's almost certainly going to be bad stress. So that's a great thing to notice, right? Because quite often, because we have been socialized to just accept demand, to say yes, to be helpful, it can be really helpful to recognize when we're being asked to do something that's unreasonable and to take that really unintuitive pause and say, I don't think that we've got the time or the resources to do it quite that way. Let's talk about what we can do. Can be one way of converting bad stress, what's initially bad stress, into a good stress situation. Okay, that's stress. Thank you very much for everyone who shared there. Let's talk about the left-hand side of this curve now. Obviously, you might have noticed we were only talking about the right-hand side before. Obviously, this is where rest and recover comes in. And one of the things that I think is really helpful about thinking about this as peak performance is not just it's where you get really good work outputs, it's also the kind of peak that you cannot stay in indefinitely, right? You think about climbing up a hill, climbing a mountain. You don't go up there and just try to stay there forever. You go up, you do what you need to get done, and you come back down, right? And if you are not deliberately moving from this space into this space pretty regularly, what you'll find is that your body cannot help but just start rolling down the other side of the hill into fight or flight. So we start to recognize that perhaps you're making unforced errors, you're making silly mistakes, you're starting to get wound up, you're starting to take shortcuts potentially just to get the thing done. Again, doing that unintuitive thing, taking a breath and taking a break, is actually the most productive thing you can do. Sometimes what feels unproductive is actually productive. Yeah. So we're going to talk about, just as we talked about good recovery, good stress, rather good stress, bad stress, we're going to talk about good recovery, bad recovery. And I love that some of you have already done a little preview of that. So on the bad recovery side, I'm talking about distraction from stress. That's not recovery. And I'm not talking about things that you feel like you should do because you read it somewhere or someone told you you should do it. The first one, in Australian culture and many Anglo cultures, we use alcohol, socializing over alcohol, as a distraction. I don't want to be the meanie who says don't drink, right? I quite like a glass of wine myself. But if it is a core piece of your theoretical recovery program, if that's how you're winding down from bad stress, I just want to alert you to the fact that it's probably not recovery. It's not a terrible thing necessarily, it's just not recovery. So, in that first year, for example, when I burnt out at work, I worked for a company that really was very proud of its work hard, play hard culture. What do we think work hard, play hard means? It means work all the hours and then socialize with all of your colleagues vent about how hard work is and drink a lot of beer, right? Not great recovery, right? So I don't want to pretend that my very intense work was the only thing that contributed to my burnout. It was also really just poor recovery practices. At the time, I did not have available to me, but now we all do, this distraction which comes with our phone and all our other devices. And again, this is not a thing that I would say don't do any of it because it's just not practical. Just don't rely on it as a recovery activity. So, scrolling, binge watching Netflix, all those things that are screen mediated are probably not getting you into that really good rest and recover zone. They're fun, they're distracting, they're not recovery. In fact, some of them, depending on what you're watching or how you're scrolling, what the algorithm's doing to you, are probably putting you into fight flight, right? Those of us who binge watched Game of Thrones when it was out will be able to connect with the idea that the screen can actually get you just as wound up as the real world around you. And the final piece of the puzzle is this idea that there are recovery activities that will obviously work for everyone. So the one that I've used here is the very common, I will sign up for the gym because I know I need to do exercise, but actually it turns out I hate the gym and now I feel guilty that I'm not going to the gym. Equally, meditation is one of those things where people, experts will tell you we have to meditate. There's just no way around it. You need to meditate. And it is a terrific skill for a lot of different things, but it doesn't work for everyone. So if there's a should attached to your recovery, it's probably not getting you into that rest and digest zone. So instead of giving you specific activities, like a laundry list of things that I think you should be doing, I'm going to give you ingredients that you can combine into different recipes. All right. So variety is really key here. You can't make a recipe with a single ingredient. So think about these ingredients, and they are move. I've very deliberately not called this exercise, but just getting out into the world and moving around. So walking is a great one here, but equally anything that's kind of slow and mindful, like yoga or Tai Chi, anything that gets you out into the world and moving is a great thing to start with. Creativity and play. So things that you used to love doing when you're a kid and maybe don't do anymore because you feel awkward as an adult and you don't, it's not good. You don't think it's good enough. And we saw a couple of those as examples, actually, which I was really pleased to see as sources of good stress. So something that's kind of challenging that you really enjoy. If it's getting you into the calm zone, and particularly if it's kind of fully absorbing your mind, so you're not ruminating on those things that are stressing you, it is a great source of recovery. Connecting with people. We're fundamentally a social animal. We really need to be connected to people who we care about and who we know care about us. If that's a problem, not everyone's got great local connections to their people if you've moved or if you're living in a big city where it's difficult to kind of make social connections. That can also come from pets. It can come from your local environment. One of my favorite things about doing the acknowledgement at the beginning of these things is it sort of forces me to kind of reconnect with what's going on country at the moment. And it's one of the things that Indigenous cultures have been terrific at cultivating and keeping alive over those millennia of social development. Reflect. So, journaling is one of those things in psychology which is really unbelievably well established as a really strong source of recovery, and at the same time, really undervalued in our culture. That time to kind of pause and get all of that, random sensory experience over the course of the day, converting it into words and sticking it in a journal or telling your loved ones about your day. Anything that helps you kind of make sense of the chaos over the course of the day is a great example of reflection. Rest, obviously, sleep is the queen of rest. So we want you to be sleeping well. And all those 4 things that we just talked about will be good contributors to getting better sleep. And the final piece of the puzzle is repetition. So I want you to channel your inner toddler and just really appreciate a routine where you can create one. And I know that's not super easy, particularly if you're leading a small business. I know a lot of you are. There's a lot of kind of random stuff that comes up over the day. Even if you can have a kind of morning routine, evening routine, those will help because stressed brains really thrive on being able to predict what comes next. So bad recovery, good recovery. Obviously, good recovery, as I said, you can mix and match these things. So, going for a walk in the park with your dog, ticks move, and probably at least 3 different kinds of connect. Sitting down with your family at the end of the day for a nice meal, assuming you like cooking. Not everyone likes cooking, but assuming you like cooking, sitting down, cooking together, talking together, reflecting on the day together is create, connect, reflect, right? So there are lots of different ways of putting these together. I don't want you to think like, I need to have half an hour for moving and half an hour for creativity and half an hour for connection. That's not what this is about. It's about being, creative about how we use our time and putting these together well. So I'm going to give you another 5 minutes now just to think about in the past day, whatever period of time you used for your good stress, bad stress, use the same period of time for your good recovery, bad recovery. You might want to think about some of the things that you put into the stress buckets. Maybe they actually belong in recovery if you feel like they get you nice and calm. I'm not saying you have to, but some of them might belong better in those recovery activities. And I'll give you another 5 minutes. All right, we've just got a minute left. So for those of you who are still taking notes, obviously keep going. I've just noticed there's a couple of comments in the chat here. Feel free to add if you're comfortable too. So ringing a support person, I love that, Jennifer, absolutely. We quite often forget to ask for help when we're facing into something. Lily's got, yeah, the Netflix habit, not enough sleep or sleeping late. Sleeping late's a really interesting one. It can absolutely be a bit of a trap, that one, where you feel like you need extra sleep and you kind of disrupt your sleep routine. So thank you for sharing that one. Conversely, spending time with your son and baby and a good meal. Absolutely. I love those. Thank you. Awesome. God, staying up late to watching, and searching something. Yes, absolutely. Going down those search rabbit holes can be a trap. Walking the dog, trekking, swimming, singing, dancing, breathing exercises. Oh, that's the 5 minutes. Sorry about that, everyone. Beautiful. Heaps and heaps of good examples there. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Excellent. All right. So, next piece of the puzzle, we have a diamond in the middle, I'm sure you've noticed, of the canvas. And when we quite often when I run these workshops, people will ask, well, all right, fine, good stress, good recovery is obviously what we're aiming for. We want a balance. You said you want a balance between stress and recovery. How do I know when my balance is right? And how do I know when I'm in each of those quadrants? And the answer is really this map of emotions, which, although the study of emotions in a kind of scientific way is actually pretty new, what all of the researchers can all agree on is that you can map them on these two dimensions. So from high energy, which means there's something else, something going on in the environment which I need to engage with or respond to in some way. So I need to be kind of dealing with it. That's where you get that kind of lift, that feel of your body responding. Versus low energy, there's nothing going on right now, or I'm so low on resources, I really just can't, right? So you think about the high energy emotions as the kind of action emotions, and the low energy ones as being the kind of withdraw, stay still emotions. The other dimension is it usually feels bad versus it usually feels good. And what you'll notice is that there are some emotions that you can feel that are on the, they're on the same place with regard to energy. They're high energy, but they feel your body's doing much the same thing in both, but how they feel, good versus bad, can really rely on what's going on. So how you feel, for example, as we saw in the first exercise, about how confident you are about being successful, how much support you've got, how much control you've got over the situation. And so the way to think about these is, if it's high energy and it feels good, it's usually an opportunity that you're going after, you're chasing it. Yeah. So one of the words that I would use there as an example, if this doesn't work for you, feel free to just strike it out and find your own words. But I would say this is a kind of excited feeling, versus on that top left, that fight or flight, fight, flee kind of response. You're more likely to feel anxious, or kind of, if it's really far off to the top left there, you're feeling kind of terror, you're feeling fear about what's going on. On the bottom half, where you're feeling fairly calm, you're essentially in an environment where, in a situation where you don't actually have to do anything, right? Pressure's off, you can just chill. So we talk about that as feeling calm, perhaps. I'm sure you'll come up with other words. Bottom left tends to be one of those ones where you kind of freezing, like you just don't really have what it takes to respond. Either it's so overwhelming, what you're being asked to do, that you just can't even start, or you've just hit the end of the day and you're completely exhausted. So we talk about being drained or frozen here. These are just examples, the ones that I've put in inverted commas. And understanding, being able to kind of recognize where you are on this map is a really good cue as to where you're actually at with your body. What's your body actually doing? Is it drawing down on resources, and how fast? Is it topping up on resources, and how fast? And this is a skill that we tend not really to help people learn through school. In fact, we tend to, particularly in Anglo cultures, we tend to kind of ignore these emotions as much as possible, pretend they're not happening because we're very busy being rational. Whereas I think for me, I think about them as your energy gauge. I think about the gauge as showing kind of whether you're going up or going down and how fast. It's a kind of really neat tool that evolution has given us for knowing where our body's up to and what we need. So if we're ignoring it, it's kind of like ignoring the fuel gauge on the car. Eventually, you're probably going to run out. So I want you to take 5 minutes now just to think about, as I said, I've got these starting point words, they're just suggestions. Think about how each of those quadrants actually feels to you, recognizing that this can be a really tough exercise to do. So for those of you who are finding this challenging, don't be discouraged. It is a matter of practice. That said, if you are neurodivergent, or if you have experienced trauma, this is going to be a more difficult exercise, potentially more uncomfortable exercise than it would be for the average person coming into the workshop. If you don't want to do this exercise, no harm, no foul. Go make a cup of tea. This is all good. But I would recommend for everyone who's kind of feeling comfortable to do it, just have a think about how these things feel. Throw some emojis in the chat if you feel like doing that. Throw some words in the chat, whatever you would like to do. I'll give you probably just a little bit shorter on this one because we're getting a little bit low on time. So maybe just a couple of minutes here. Go for it. And if you're comfortable to share, just drop in some of your words in the chat or emojis if you prefer. Some of you, I'm sure, are busily doing sketches rather than using words. All of that stuff is good. This is just tuning into a gauge that hundreds of millions of years of evolution have given us, and which in Western culture we tend to ignore and undervalue, which is, I think, part of, in fact, demonstrated in research, part of burnout. So if we're not paying attention to how we're feeling, much more likely to head on that downward path. Okay, moving on to the next piece of the puzzle. A question for you, now that there are 24 people or so on the call. How much of what we've talked about, good stress, good recovery, bad recovery, using emotions as a guide to your energy levels, how much of it's like completely new? So if it's completely new, stick a 5 in the chat. If it is all stuff that you've heard before, in fact, you're so confident about this stuff, you actually could have been presenting, put a 1 in the chat. So none of it's new, 1, all of it's new, 5, and then obviously anything in between. middle ground. Yeah, 2. So Jennifer's, yeah, Brianna's also pretty familiar with it. Yeah, okay. So far, all below that midline. Yeah. Okay, so interestingly, this is not, a lot of this stuff is, this is not bleeding edge research, right? We're learning a lot more from the neuroscience now that we can actually do scans of what's going on in people's brains, but it's not necessarily telling us new stuff. It's just confirming things that we've observed from other experimental methods, which then begs the question, right? Well, if we know all of this stuff, why do we still have such a problem with burnout? Right? We know it, but we can't do it. It's simple, but it's not easy, which is an absolute dead giveaway of a systems problem, right? So what's happening here is we have what we know to be important. We know that taking care of our health is important. We know these things are important. They just don't get rewarded, right? So all the things you get rewarded, what we've been socialized through school and home, through the world of, work ethic and showing up and doing the thing and achieving and climbing the ladder and all those wonderful metaphors for what we do in the world. We get rewarded for achievement. We get rewarded for helping. We get rewarded for saying yes. We rarely get rewarded for taking care of our health. Either in that kind of immediate way, because sometimes the activities we do feel uncomfortable to us to begin with, or particularly by the social groups that we interact with. And so the way that we tackle a systems problem, obviously, is with a systems solution. So what we want to be doing is think about bringing those two circles together. So we want to find ways to reward more of what's important. So we want to stop rewarding toxic productivity. It's not about slacking off, as I said at the beginning. It's not about stopping rewarding really great work and doing the really important work, but it is about recognizing where perhaps we're patting ourselves on the back for burning the candle at both ends, right? We have all of these, burning the midnight oil. We have all of these things that we point to as being indicators of being really good workers, which are probably not helpful in rebalancing towards healthy high performance. So what do we mean by rewarding healthy high performance? We mean paying attention to when we're doing the right stuff, some of which is not going to feel productive in the moment. Yeah, so rewarding the things that genuinely contribute to getting the important stuff done, rewarding when we're actually taking care of our health, which is what allows us to perform over the long run. So I'm going to spend 5 minutes now, final 5-minute exercise, or nearly final 5-minute exercise, because there's just one little one right at the end, where I want you to think about what's going on in your external, either physical environment, so what's going on physically for you in your neighborhood, your house, whatever it might be, in your social environment, your families, your work teams, whoever it is that you encounter regularly in the day, and inside your own head, in the way that you're thinking about the world, in where your attention is at, which pulls you in the right direction, so towards good stress and good recovery, and those things that pull you in the wrong direction, the things that pull you towards bad stress, bad recovery. 5 minutes here, because this can sometimes be a little bit more challenging. And feel free again to share in the chat when you're encountering things that are interesting to you and that you'd like to share. Okay, getting to the end of that 5 minutes. Thanks for sharing there, Jennifer. I love that achievable agenda. Absolutely. One of the things that pulls us in the right direction is really having a sensible list that we're working to, as opposed to trying to do all the things. Any other observations there that people wanted to share before we move on to the final piece of the puzzle? Yeah, external validation, waiting for someone else to say it's good. I love it, people pleasing, not knowing your own worth. Yeah, absolutely. Not speaking the truth. Positive self respect, knowing my own boundaries. Yep, knowing your needs and taking care of those, healthy communication. Yeah, beautiful examples there. Thank you, Gamza. So the things that can pull us in the right or the wrong direction can be things that we have control over, and they can sometimes be things that we just don't have control over. And quite often, the things that we have most control over, in fact, I would argue everything we have the most control over, is how we're tackling the challenges in front of us and where our attention is at. So, there are going to be things in life, it's part of the reason why we've got such a problem with burnout at the moment, that pull us in the wrong direction that there's very little we can do about. Right. So, things like financial pressure, ongoing caring duties, the expectations that people have on the role, our gender role, or other roles that we have in caring in the world, that are just going to constantly pull us in the wrong direction. If we're temperamentally built to just not experience positive emotions, that is going to pull us in the wrong direction there. That's not to say that we can't also build infrastructure on that right hand side to pull us in the right direction, to learn skills, to set ourselves up with the right social supports, to just make it a bit easier to pull in the right direction. So while it's important to understand what's in the middle of the picture that we've been building this morning, the real power is actually on these outside edges. In the same way that, if you try to balance kids on a seesaw, you're going to get more leverage by sticking them out on the far ends rather than in the middle. This is where the attention needs to be if you want to shift your system. So, what we have done this morning together is to fill out what might feel like a bit of an overwhelming picture to a lot of you. If you're feeling like this is a lot, I hear you. I will just ask you to not try to solve it all at once, to look at this as your starting point. This is what I would call a baseline for your system. This is just what it looks like right now. The facts are in front of you. What you have the opportunity to do, perhaps, as you're pondering this through the rest of the day, and I'm just conscious we're really close to time, so I won't make you do this in the moment, but I'd love you just to pick one or two things that you would like to shift from the left to the right. If it's something that you're saying to yourself that you could flip around and make it a little bit more positive, stick it on the right hand side. If there is a good recovery activity that you want to amplify in some way, that you want to reach out to a friend and say, hey, I'm having trouble getting out for my end of day walk, do you want to come? There are going to be ways that you can make very small changes to your system in a way that removes some of these rocks, right? We live in a society that just has a bunch of weight in this system at the moment. That is the way that feedbacks work for us in a lot of cases. In order to flip this system around, what we're trying to do is to build those little bits of lift that are going to help us head in the opposite direction. Because if we understand the downslope, we can start building the upslope where we've got more recovery than stress in the course of the day. And this is not just for you, it's for all of us, because everything you do in your lives and the way that you interact with the people in your lives will ripple out. You are role modeling, building a positive system, you're building it for yourself, you're more present in those interactions, and that has compound effects as you are going out there in the world. And I want to thank you so much for coming this morning. It's been a pleasure working with you. I can stick around if you've got time that you want to ask questions. Otherwise, I will obviously bid you an awesome day ahead. Thanks, everyone. Oh, Vivian, terrific question. And you can't think straight to work out how to get some things off. So I would start just by externalizing everything that's in your brain. So part of the stress that we experience is just cognitive load. There's just too much in our brain to keep track of. So we're really built not to be able to retain much more than somewhere between 5 to 9 different things. So if you've got 20 different things floating around, write them all down. Yeah, that would be the first thing I would do. And then I would go through a prioritization exercise. And there's a lot of different ways of doing this, but the Eisenhower matrix is really quite useful. So think about the things that are really important to get done. So things that really will make a difference to things that are important to you, to your business, to whatever it is that you're working on, and the things that are urgent, right? Things that really have a deadline to them, and just pick off those things that are important and urgent straight away. Like that will make you feel like you're making progress towards the things that are important to you. And once those are taken care of, then swing back around to the other pieces of the puzzle, right? There are things that are going to be important, not urgent. You want to try to get ahead of those so they don't become urgent. There are going to be things that are not important but feel urgent. Just find a way not to do them. Go back to whoever it is who's asked you to do those things and say, look, I'm sorry, I just actually don't have time to do those things. And obviously, you can completely ignore if it's not important and not urgent, just get rid of it, delete it, draw a line through those things. Does that help? Excellent. Very good. Any other questions, anyone? Oh, no worries, Georgia. Rewarding good recovery things. How would you reward? Such a good question, Georgia. Thank you. So this one's really tough, right? I won't lie, because our whole culture at the moment is built to reward us for things that are more likely to create stress than not. So I would first of all look for things that are rewarding in and of themselves. That's why I land really hard on that word should. If a recovery activity feels like a should activity, then it's probably not a recovery activity in the long run, right? Sometimes we can find a way to enjoying something. So I am a runner, and I know when you first start running, running just feels awful. It's just a really, really hard thing to get into. But after a couple of weeks of running, it starts to feel better. So I would look for things that, even if they don't feel good the first time you try them, at least after a couple of weeks, they're starting to feel good. So that's the first thing. Find things that actually you look forward to doing, they feel fun. And I know that is culturally really uncomfortable, right? Like there can be a level of guilt that comes with, oh, well, I'm allowed to do things that are nice, that actually make me feel good. So I would almost, as a part of this exercise, cultivate a little bit of a rebellious streak. Well, yes, I deserve to do things that just feel nice, right? So pick something that you actually look forward to doing is probably the easiest way of finding something that's rewarding in and of itself. If you're really struggling, there are other ways of kind of building rewards into things. So one of the best ones is to find a way of making it a social encounter as well. So things that are one of the things that's really great, and much as I've laughed at gym memberships, one of the things that's really great about gym memberships is group classes, because they're quite often a really good source of social interaction, social connection, through your local gym. So either finding that kind of that new social group to be doing an activity with, or reconnecting or deepening a connection with someone at work or in your kind of other social lives, social circles, where you're looking forward to socializing and you're also doing something together, right? You're going for a walk, or maybe going to a painting class. I don't know, whatever you really feel like you'd enjoy and you could do just with a little bit of an accountability buddy on. Just reach out to someone and say, hey, I'd like to try this thing. Do you want to try this thing with me? Does that help? Does it sound like it might be worth a try? Oh, yeah, Naveen's talking about accountability buddies as well. Yeah. Gamza? Sorry, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. Could you help
Yes,
me?
you're saying it correct. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
great.
This was really a great presentation.
Oh,
Just wanted
good.
to share, in my experience with my clients and myself also, burnout is more like a femininity, masculinity imbalance problem. And you said it just so beautifully. Masculinity being the action taking, and yes, it's being rewarded, whereas femininity is like being more in tune with yourself, having this time to and the space to really taking care of the self, the inclusiveness of the self also.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lovely poetic way of
Mhm.
describing the same thing, yeah, masculine, feminine. Yeah. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Uh, more comments. So getting the reward from the enjoyment of the activity. Yes, Georgia, exactly. Yeah. So just, build little sources of joy into your life. I guarantee they're going to be creating restoration and recovery for you. Any other questions, anyone? Lovely discussion. Thank you. Thanks for sticking around. My pleasure. Awesome. Well, do obviously stay in touch. We will be running this workshop again through Creative Mornings in December. So if you know people who will be interested, obviously have them sign up. We'll let you know when the next one rolls around. And through the rest of October, we're doing an end of week reflection session, walking the talk on reflection, because we know it can be hard to make time for. So if you're on the Festival of Flourishing list, obviously you'll get those invitations. If you haven't had access to those, or you're a bit lost because there's a lot going on in October, just email us and we'll add you. Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome day ahead.